Hello everyone. Welcome to today's IELTS class. My name is Adrian. I am your IELTS teacher for today. And today we are going to be looking at the reading section of the IELTS exam. Hi all of those who are joining right now. Hi Mani. Hi Abhishek. Hi Amar Wadi. Just a quick audio video check here. Can everybody hear me okay right now? And can you see the board behind me all right? Waiting for a couple of yeses. Awesome. Thank you, Neo. Thank you, Abhishek, Rabik, Khadija. Great. So today we're focusing on reading practice. I'm broadcasting to you live from beautiful Budapest, Hungary, Central Europe. And of course, as usual, our materials are coming from our websites, aehelp.com for academic IELTS and gieltshelp.com for general IELTS. If you're following these live classes regularly, I definitely recommend going to our website and joining the full course so you can download all of our practice exams. There's 6 of them. We are going through each practice exam right now step by step over the course of the next several weeks. So it's a great time to join, download the books so you can follow along with the live lessons. Of course, you can find all of our recorded videos there as well. There's a total of, I think, like 70 videos up now. Some of those are pre-recorded HD videos. And you can use the coupon code LIVE20 for a 20% discount when you join the course on the website. Of course, you can always use Super Chat in your chat stream in these live lessons if you have some important question or comment that you want to make. Those will be highlighted and they will be sticky so I can see them, answer them. And for those of you who want to book practice speaking interviews through Skype with me, that's a paid service, of course. So you can send me an email, adrian@aehelp.com, or you can book it on your My Student account in your website at gieltshelp.com or aehelp.com, where there are editing and writing services also available. Awesome. So lots of people have joined in. Great. Good to see so many of you. Right now we're looking at test book number 1, and this is test 1, the review test if you have the curriculum book. And the passage we will be looking at right now is called Mountains of Ice. We are probably the only company in the world that gives you audio for the reading sections, not just for the listening sections, and we also give you audio for the speaking sections so you can get a lot more effective practice to get your nice high IELTS band scores in. All right, so the goal for today is to try to do at least a couple of passages nice and smooth. Of course, you have 20 minutes for each of these passages about, so you should be reading the passage in about 10 minutes and leaving about 10 minutes for your answers, okay? Now, we'll get going nice and smooth here, nice and quick. So what we'll do is we'll read the passage, and I'm going to play the audio for you so you can read along with the native British English speaker. It's coming out of CD1, track 5 in your online course. For those of you who do not have our course, don't stress. You can see the questions in the stream description. Is everybody ready to do a little bit of read along? And if you can, read nice and loud, okay? All right, so let's jump to the website here. This is our general IELTS website with the green background, but today we're going to get into or log into our academic website with the blue black background. The login is at the top when you go to our webpage, so you use your email and your password, of course, log in. And then after you're logged in, you have access to all of our wonderful materials to help you get those high IELTS band scores. We use psychology. A lot of our experts have degrees in psychology. So we use psychology and education to maximize your learning. And that's also one of the reasons why we include audio for the reading. So here are the CDs, lots and lots of audio material there on the website. And if everybody's ready to go, then I will start playing this audio. So we'll do a nice quick warm-up read along here, get right into it. All right, here we go. Everybody's ready? You don't have to worry about questions or anything like that. The focus right now is just make sure that you're keeping up with the speed of the reader and try to understand the passage as much as you can.
Icebergs. The word iceberg derives from the Dutch word Iceberg, meaning ice mountain. Icebergs are sections of glaciers that are broken off during the warm summer months and float freely in open water. Icebergs are typically found in open water, predominantly around Greenland and Antarctica. The characteristics of icebergs, their historical impact, and the methods we employ today to monitor them are important topics. The reason icebergs exist is because of the difference between the density of ice and the density of salt water. The density of ice is approximately 920 kilograms per cubic meter, while the density of salt water is approximately 1,025 kilograms per cubic meter. Because ice is less dense than water, it floats. However, because the difference in densities is so small, only about 10% of the iceberg is visible above the ocean's surface. The rest of the iceberg hides below the water. This is the origin of the familiar expression, tip of the iceberg, used to describe a situation where only part of the problem is noticeable. Icebergs range in height from 1 meter all the way up to over 75 meters above sea level. The height measures the visible portion of the iceberg. The tallest icebergs may have a total height of over 650 meters, including their underwater portion. The largest ever recorded was 168 meters above the water, meaning the entire height of this floater was likely greater than 1,500 meters. For reference, that is twice the height of most skyscrapers. Different sized icebergs have different name classifications. The smallest icebergs are called brash ice. The next category up in size is called growlers, and the ones after that are called bergy bits. For whatever reason, after those three classes, the people in charge of naming the icebergs got a little less creative. The next classes simply ranged from small to very large. Icebergs can be massive objects. Very large icebergs can weigh more than 200,000 tons. The largest iceberg ever recorded was over 30,000 square kilometers in area. Again, for reference, that is the approximate size of the country of Belgium. The most famous iceberg in history is undoubtedly the one which eventually sunk the English ship Titanic off the coast of Newfoundland in 1912. At that point in time, there was no central group which monitored iceberg activity. Ships relied on lookouts to spot the icebergs. For the Titanic, the unfortunate attitude was that any iceberg big enough to do damage to the ship would be seen in time. This attitude was, of course, catastrophically wrong. The main reason it failed was the remarkable calmness of the water that ill-fated night. The easiest way to spot an iceberg from afar is to see waves crashing up against it. But on the night the Titanic sank, there were no such helpful waves. For all intents and purposes, the iceberg was invisible until it was too late. The captain swerved at the last minute, but as the side of the ship scraped across the iceberg, the hull of the ocean liner tore open. Things still may have been fine had it not been for the poorly designed watertight compartments. It turns out that when too many compartments were affected, the water was simply able to spill over to all the other compartments. This was an engineering defect that contributed to the Titanic's sinking. After the disaster of the Titanic, maritime authorities realized that a system needed to be put into place to monitor icebergs so that such a catastrophe would not be repeated. By 1914, the International Ice Patrol, IIP, was formed. Their purpose was to track all of the relevant meteorological and oceanographical data and to chart the movement of all major icebergs. Today, technology is used to track iceberg data. The Canadian Space Agency has multiple radar satellites which send microwaves off the ocean surface and record the reflection to track the movement of the icebergs. Maritime vessels have access to this information in real time, which allows them to know exactly where any local icebergs are at any moment, meaning that a repeat of the Titanic disaster is virtually impossible.
All right, so I hope everybody was able to follow along with that reader. And now we're going to go back. Yeah, we didn't read any of the questions, Safa, and I did that on purpose this time because here all I want to focus on for now is active reading. So when you're practicing active reading at home for the IELTS, it's a good idea not to worry about the questions, okay? Sometimes all students do at home when practicing for the IELTS is just keep doing tests and tests and tests without actually developing their fundamental skills of comprehension and fluency in their reading. And that's not good. Okay, you want to focus and target your fluency and your comprehension skills. One way, of course, to improve your fluency is to do these kinds of read-alongs and keep up with the speed of the reader. So improve fluency by keeping speed with the reader of a text. And as I mentioned, on our website, all of our reading passages have this. So it's a great starting point to increase your fluency. Now, active reading is, of course, another very important aspect to focus on when you're building your reading skills. Okay? And active reading means increasing your comprehension so that you can clearly understand the text in a structured format. Okay? So what you want to do for that is, don't worry about the questions for the reading passage. Just worry about creating your own questions and answers. And you can do this in a classroom or you can do this in partners at home, okay? So practice in class or in partners, reading, creating, and answering questions. Now, what you want to do when you do this is, number one, go in the order of the passage. Okay? So don't start with questions about the Titanic in this case, or don't start with questions about how icebergs are monitored. But of course, you should start by asking questions about what are icebergs, right? So go in order of the passage and ask lots of follow-up questions. So I'll start us off here. Where does the word iceberg originate? Okay, and if you can do a good job asking these questions and answering them, you'll be able to do a good job in IELTS, all right? So the goal of IELTS is not just to try to search for answers. As you already know, skimming and scanning is a bad idea. Now, Sky, that is the correct answer. So give me a full sentence answer, okay? Always use full sentence answers, okay? Questions and answers. Okay, so the answer for this one is it comes from the Dutch language. All right, what is a good next question? So can somebody ask me the next question that would be good to ask? What would be a good question to ask your partner in this case if you just did this reading? That's right, Utsav. That would be a good way to do it in a full sentence. Yeah, Hadil, sure. What is an iceberg? Yeah. Excellent. That's a great question. Yeah, always go with that what? Using your critical thinking, right? What, why, how. So what is an iceberg? And how are they formed? That's another great question, Mohammed. So can somebody answer that question? What is an iceberg? It is a mountain of ice. Give me some more details, Hadil. I see your comment, Sophine, as well. If you sent me a request to add you on Skype, I'll take a look at that later today or tomorrow. It is a mountain of ice that, what? Found in open water, that floats freely in open water. Okay. Can anybody give me any more information about what is an iceberg? Okay, it doesn't completely float on the surface of the ocean, Shiji, but you're close. All right. Let me ask you a question instead then. Why does an iceberg float in the ocean? Okay, so why does the iceberg float in the ocean? Yeah, exactly, Shiji. It has less density than salt water. And again, for those of you that are learning some new words here, make sure you have your pencil and paper and write them down. If you're not familiar with the word density, that's a great word to know, especially if you're a physics or a chemistry major and you're looking to study abroad. Okay, is it much less dense than salt water or just slightly? Let me ask you a different question here. How much of the total iceberg is visible above the water? Kokri, if you didn't read the passage, don't worry about it. We'll read it again a little bit later once we finish asking these questions. So Nargiza says 10%. Okay, I'll ask you one more question here. What idiom, and this is a common idiom in English, what idiom in English is associated with icebergs? And what does it mean? So here's a good chance for everyone who's watching right now to learn an English idiom that's commonly used in everyday speech. Very good, Sky. Yeah, it's the tip of the iceberg. And what does that mean, tip of the iceberg? What is the definition of this wonderful idiom? And again, if you visualize and understand the connection between humans and icebergs, then you can figure out the meaning of such an idiom. So Utsav says it means that the whole situation is not visible. In fact, even more specifically, Utsav, it means that the whole problem is not visible. Only the beginning or the first part of the problem is visible. Let's try it a third time there. All right. So it means that only a part of a major problem is visible. Absolutely. Okay, and then you keep going like this. So you keep going with these questions and answers. So the next question is, I'm going to jump a little bit here. Of course, there's the naming of icebergs and some other details there about icebergs, but I'm going to do a little bit of a jump forward here. So my next question is, what is the most famous iceberg in history? Anybody know the answer to that one? What is the most famous iceberg for people in history? The one that sank the English ship Titanic. That's right. So all of you who are writing that up there right now, absolutely. Yeah, that big one, Shiji, is also famous, but according to the passage, the one that's most famous is the one that sank the Titanic, because it was tragic and a lot of people died. And of course, that was one of the major events which led to us these days monitoring icebergs. Now, some of you probably realize that when we were doing our listening the day before yesterday, I believe, we were listening to information about the Titanic, different information. Again, this is one of the unique parts of our IELTS materials, is that we have interconnections among the topics in the listening and the reading and writing and speaking sections between different exams. And that's because we feel that that way students learn much more effectively. Again, this is us using the psychology of education to make your learning more effective. So that's why we link topics gently between our reading passages and our listening and other sections of the IELTS exam. It makes your learning much more effective. That's proven in psychology. So again, if you want to learn from some of the best IELTS materials in the world, definitely do join our websites. It's well worth the investment, especially considering the IELTS exam costs close to $300 US. All right, so the famous ship, the Titanic, we spoke about that. And here I'll ask you one more question. So what is the organization that monitors icebergs today? Not icebergers, but icebergs. All right. So what is the organization that monitors icebergs today? It is the IIP. That's right, Muhammad Wahab. What does the IIP stand for? What does it actually mean? Anybody know? What is the actual meaning of the acronym IIP? No, not port. International Ice Patrol, I believe, is what it was. Iceberg Patrol. Okay, good. So you get the idea, all right? I'm not going to go into a lot of questions. When you're doing this in your classroom or when you're doing this with your partner, you want to go into as many questions as you can. First, one of you asks the question, the other answers, and then the other asks the question and then answers. So keep switching between each other. Very, very effective way to improve your comprehension and also improve the way that your brain structures information from the beginning of the passage to the end. I see that with a lot of students. Their big problem when they read is they forget a lot of the information that they read, even though they understand it. And then a lot of students that do remember some of the information, they remember it in a very disorganized fashion. So they jump around in the information. That's not good, okay? The questions in IELTS follow usually the structure of the information. So you want to build that skill. It will not only help you for IELTS, it will help you in life, in your work, and in your school as well, okay? So again, make sure to practice this skill. Active reading. So you develop skills not only to remember what you read, but also to remember the information in its correct structure. Okay, so this is great exercise for you to do at home. All right. Let me just save this file here for a second, guys. I didn't do that at the beginning, so I'll have to do that now. Okay, so now what we'll do is we'll actually look at the passage again, and then we will answer the questions and do it according to how you should be doing this in the official exam. All right, so let's jump back to the passage here. So here's our passage again. It's icebergs, mountains of ice. Okay, first step, of course, as usual, is you look at the picture, you look at the title, you read the title. You visualize and you use critical thinking. What is this about? Why are we talking about it? How does it work? So now we're doing it in a little bit of reverse, all right? And now you should be able to answer these 3 questions easily. So what are we talking about? We're talking about icebergs. Here's an interesting question. Why? Why are we talking about icebergs? Why does this passage tell us all of this great information about icebergs? Why care about this? Why lose sleep over it, as they say? Anybody? It's not about the ice melting, but yeah, Burak, that's maybe an answer, especially if you haven't read the passage. It's not in the passage, so global warming is not a part of it. Muradi says, because of the Titanic stuff, it says to explain the disaster. Not just necessarily, because of its impacts, is what JS7 says. So, yeah, the impacts of icebergs, and one of the impacts is global warming and rising sea levels, of course. But in this case, in the passage, for those of you that were here for the audio, you realize that icebergs are very dangerous for boats, right? For ships. As we know, it sank the Titanic, and even though we have iceberg monitoring today, I'm sure that some boats still get into some trouble with icebergs. Yeah, that's right, Mahdi. The dangers of icebergs for humans. Okay, and how? Well, they just float around in the ocean, minding their own business, and then along comes a human ship, and bang, into it goes, sinks. People are jumping off the ship. Poor guys out there in the ocean, middle of nowhere. And they're trying to survive. So that is the how. Okay, so we look at the picture, we visualize, we think about the what, why, how very quickly. And then what do we do next? So after we did some visualizing, we used some critical thinking, we read the title, we were predicting. What do we do next? Anybody? Yeah, read some of the questions Safa's saying. Yeah, let's look at that, all right? So the timing of this, if you're asking about that, Cochry, you're doing the predicting, the visualizing, and looking at the questions very quickly. You're only spending about 1 minute to 2 minutes on this. So there's no list of headings questions in this one. So we look at the questions that come after the passage, and right away we see here that the first set of questions is a yes, no, not given. Do we read them? Do we read these yes, no, not given questions? Should we skim read these? No, 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 no. Mahdi does a long no for us, a very effective no. Yeah, absolutely not. Why not? Because there is false and additional information in here that's not in the passage. It's only going to be confusing. Okay, so we do not read those questions. And then we go to the next set of questions. Choose one word only from the passage. We're paying careful attention to the instructions. And then here we can see the sinking of the Titanic. So boom, right away we know that this is probably coming from just one part of the passage. Should we read this one? Should we skim read it? JS7 says this one's probably the easiest one to score marks, and indeed you're probably right. This is passage number 1, so it should be the easiest one. All of you are saying let's read it, and you're correct because it's paraphrasing information from the passage, so it will help you to understand it. So you're reading it very quickly, you're just skim reading it. Because there was no international group which monitored icebergs in 1912, it was the sole responsibility to make sure there were no icebergs in the ship's path. The chief reason for iceberg wasn't detected was of the sea that night. Because of this, there were no waves crashing up against the iceberg, making it difficult to spot. The captain swerved, but the iceberg scraped the ice of the ship, ripping the ship. Things could have been fine nevertheless, but the watertight compartments were poorly designed. Once the water was in a few compartments, it would be able to enter the other compartments. This was a major engineering defect, which resulted in eventual sinking. Okay, good. So if you practice reading aloud enough, you'll read that fast. fast. Okay, so you skim read that good, you get an idea of what it's about, and then you go on to the next question, 10 to 13. 10 to 13, fill in the blanks. You're skim reading, guys. I know that was a bit fast, obviously. This is my job. This is what I do for a living. I've read a lot of books, etc. But if you keep reading in English, believe me, you will be able to skim read very, very quickly, especially in your mind, maybe not aloud. All right, so here we go. Fill in the blanks. Should we read this one? Anybody? Should we be reading this one, the fill in the blanks question? Yes, absolutely. Okay, so skim read over this as well. To avoid a Titanic-like disaster in the future, something formed the International Ice Patrol. Okay, the IPP's goal is to track the relevant data, and the Canadian Space Agency bounces something off the water. This data renders large-scale maritime disasters something. Okay, good. So we looked over those. Now we can go back and read the passage at a nice, comfortable pace. So let's read the passage again together, and then we'll answer the questions. All right, so here we go. And you can read at this speed. So I'm going to read a little bit slower than the audio. So you can read at this speed. Please, 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 those of you who are new to these classes, new to our program and our websites, please remember, skimming and scanning is not an effective strategy to get a score over 6. All right, you can get a few marks, but it will not help you with most marks because a lot of the questions are paraphrased and you cannot search for paraphrasing, or it's very difficult. So let's read. Mountains of ice. The word iceberg derives from the Dutch word Iceberg, meaning ice mountain. Icebergs are sections of glaciers that have broken off during the warmer summer months and float freely in open water. Icebergs are typically found in open water, predominantly around Greenland and Antarctica. The characteristics of icebergs, their historical impact, and the methods we employ today to monitor them are important topics. The reason icebergs exist is because of the difference between the density of ice and the density of salt water. The density of ice is approximately 920 kilograms per cubic meter, while the density of salt water is approximately 1,025 kilograms per cubic meter. Because ice is less dense than water, it floats. However, because the difference in densities is so small, only about 10% of the iceberg is visible above the ocean's surface. The rest of the iceberg hides below the water. This is the origin of the familiar expression, tip of the iceberg, used to describe a situation where only part of the problem is noticeable. Icebergs range in height from 1 meter all the way up to over 75 meters above sea level. The height measures the visible portion of the iceberg. The tallest iceberg may have a total height of over 650 meters, including their underwater portion. The largest ever recorded was 168 meters above the water, meaning the entire height of this floater was likely greater than 1,500 meters. For reference, that is twice the height of most skyscrapers. Different sized icebergs have different name classifications. The smallest icebergs are called brash ice. The next category up in size is called growlers, and the ones after that are called bergy bits. For whatever reason, after those 3 classes, the people in charge of naming icebergs got a little less creative. The next classes simply range from small to very large. Icebergs can be massive objects. Very large icebergs can weigh more than 200,000 tons. The largest iceberg ever recorded was over 30,000 square kilometers in area. Again, for reference, that is the approximate size of the country of Belgium. The most famous iceberg in history is undoubtedly the one which eventually sunk the English ship Titanic off the coast of Newfoundland in 1912. At that point in time, there was no central group which monitored iceberg activity. Ships relied on lookouts to spot the iceberg. For the Titanic, the unfortunate attitude was that any iceberg big enough to do damage to the ship would be seen in time. This attitude, of course, was catastrophically wrong. The main reason it failed was the remarkable calmness of the water that ill-fated night. The easiest way to spot an iceberg from afar is to see waves crashing up against it. But on the night the Titanic sank, there were no such helpful waves. For all intents and purposes, the iceberg was invisible until it was too late. The captain swerved at the last minute, but as the side of the ship scraped across the iceberg, the hull of the ocean liner tore open. Things still may have been fine had it not been for the poorly designed watertight compartments. It turns out that when too many compartments were affected, the water was simply able to spill over to all the other compartments. This was an engineering defect that contributed to the Titanic's sinking. After the disaster of the Titanic, maritime authorities realized that a system needed to be put into place to monitor icebergs so that such a catastrophe would not be repeated. By 1914, the International Ice Patrol, IIP, was formed. Their purpose was to track all of the relevant meteorological and oceanographical data and to chart the movement of all major icebergs. Today, technology is used to track iceberg data. The Canadian Space Agency has multiple radar satellites which send microwaves off the ocean surface and record the reflection to track the movement of the iceberg. Maritime vessels have access to this information in real time, which allows them to know exactly where any local icebergs are at any moment, meaning that a repeat of the Titanic disaster is virtually impossible. Okay, so girls and guys, that speed is fine, absolutely fine when you're in the IELTS. If you're using the right strategies, to answer questions, you should be able to read the paragraph at that speed. Now, when you're reading it at that speed, you should be able to understand 60 to 70% of the passage in order to get a band 7 on IELTS. Okay, so I'll repeat that again. That's quite an important piece of information. If you can read the passage at that speed and you can understand about 70% of the passage, you should be able to get 7 on IELTS or even 7.5. Okay. Now, of course, if you can't, then you need to work on improving your fluency and your comprehension. Don't just keep doing practice exams. That will help a bit, but it's not the most effective way to do it. Shita, we're about to get into a strategy right now. So, we read the passage, we feel confident that we understood it for the most part, and now we look at some of these questions. So here's the yes, no, not given question. Okay, icebergs are sections of glaciers that have broken off in winter months. So the strategy for yes, no, not given is the same as true, false, not given. You have to first ask yourself, is it important? So is it important for this passage what icebergs are? Okay. Is it important to know? Don't worry about the answer yet, guys. I want to teach you this, and girls, I want to teach you the strategy on how to get the right answer for most of these kinds of true, false, not given questions, okay? So is this important for the passage? Is it important to know what icebergs are, how they're formed? Yes, absolutely. This is one of the main topics of the passage, is how icebergs are formed. So it's definitely important for this topic. Is it true that icebergs are sections of glaciers that break off in winter months? Pay attention to the details of the question. So is it true? It's definitely important. Now, is it true? So important, Yes, right? If it's important, then it means that it's either a yes or a no. It's not a not given, okay? So, is it true? The answer is no. So, therefore, the answer to this question is no. Okay? Makes sense. It's not false. Careful, Lytton. This is a yes, no, not given. So in this case, if you see yes, no, not given, make sure that you write no, not false, okay? All right. Let's go to the next one. Icebergs exist because of the different densities of ice and salt water. Again, is it important? Is it important to know why icebergs exist according to this passage? Is it important? Yes, it's important. Absolutely. Is it true? It has to be either yes or a no here. So is it true? According to the passage, is this true then? Yes, it absolutely is. So your answer is yes. Okay? If you don't know the answer to the first question, you're in trouble. That means you probably didn't understand 70% of the passage. If you don't know the answer to your second question, that's when you can go back and look at the passage again to see if you can find the answer somewhere. All right, 90% of the iceberg is hidden below the water. So here, is it important to know how much of the iceberg is below and above the water? Is it important for this information in the passage? Yes, absolutely it is. And it is paraphrasing. It's descriptive paraphrasing, so good for you, Utsav, for recognizing that. Or it's giving you an antonym paraphrase here. Is it true that 90% of the iceberg is hidden below the water? Okay, remember this is yes if the statement agrees with the claims of the writer, no if the statement contradicts, and not given if it is impossible to say what the writer thinks about this. Okay, so here it's yes because it is possible to know what the author says about this. The author says that 10% of the iceberg is visible above. So by math, simple math, we know that it's true. It has to be a yes. Okay? Even though the author doesn't speak about this one, it is a yes because if it is impossible to say what the writer thinks about it. In this case, it's possible to say what the writer thinks about it. The writer says that 10% is visible above the water, which means that 90% hides below the water. The writer also says the rest of it is below the water. Okay? So it has to be a yes. The name classifications of icebergs derive from the Dutch language. Is it important to know where name classifications for icebergs come from? Where do the name classifications come from? Is it important? Careful. Sometimes these questions are a bit tricky. Don't confuse it. No, it doesn't tell us where the name classification comes from, okay? It tells us where the word iceberg comes from, but it does not tell us where the name classification comes from, okay? So is it important to know where the name classifications of iceberg? It's not the name iceberg, it's the name classifications, okay? So is it important to know where those come from? No, it's not. So when it's not important, then immediately your answer should be not given, okay? They tell us where the word iceberg comes from, but they don't tell us who was responsible for the naming of different sizes of icebergs. Okay, the last one, number 5. Some icebergs can be the size of a country. Is it important to know how big and how small icebergs are? Is that important for us? Careful here, the size is the focus. So is it important for us to know the size of icebergs. Yes, the passage talks actually quite a bit about the different sizes of icebergs, okay? So then we ask, is it true that they can be the size of a country? Is it true that they can be the size of an entire country? Utsab says the largest one was the size of Belgium, and Belgium by no means is a small country. Belgium is a very large country relative to other countries in the world. So we can definitely know that the writer believes that this is true. So yes. So no, yes, yes, not given, yes. Okay, are the correct answers there. All right. Hopefully you got that. Okay, so again, no, yes, yes. So the strategy for yes, no, not given and true, false, not given is ask yourself, is it important for the passage? If yes, it has to be either yes or no. If it's not important, it's a not given. Okay, and then if you know it's important, then ask, is it true? And IELTS reports real facts as best as we know in current science and knowledge. So if you know the answer to that from your own knowledge, you can figure it out even without reading the passage, all right? I know a lot of students have difficulties with this type of question. It works really, really well, this kind of strategy, all right? So that's what you want to do. Using logic for yes, no, not given, true, false, not given, Mahdi, absolutely can help you to get at least half of these questions correct. Often, I don't suggest trying this on the IELTS, but you can often get half of them right without even reading. Okay, just by looking at the topic of the passage and going through it in this way. If you're a good critical thinker, you can figure out a lot of the answers. All right, okay. Let's have a look at the next set here. Now, even with this kind of paragraph completion question, you should be able to figure out a lot of the answers just by remembering what you read. So here, it's the sinking of the Titanic. Now, we read the passage, so we know it's very easy to search for these answers because it's all in one paragraph, okay? So here, what you're paying attention to is the paraphrasing. Okay, so for this one, the key strategy is paraphrasing, okay? So pay close attention to the paraphrasing between the question and the passage. All right, let's try to do as much of it as we can without looking back, and then we can look back if we have to. Because there was no international group which monitored icebergs in 1912, it was the sole responsibility of the WHO to make sure there were no icebergs in the ship's path. So obviously this is going to be a WHO, and it's no more than one word, I believe. Yeah. Only one word from the passage. So who's responsible for spotting the iceberg? Some of you are saying scouts, some of you are saying captain. I believe the answer was lookout. Okay, lookout as one word. So look and out, you put those together as one word. It's somebody who is, okay, a scout is kind of a lookout of sorts, but it's not specifically. If I'm not sure, again, I can go back to the passage and I can look at this paragraph, but hopefully you don't have to do this for all of the answers. So at that point in time, there was no central group which monitored iceberg activity. Ships relied on lookouts to spot the icebergs. So notice the paraphrasing. Ships relied on. Ships relied on means it was the responsibility of lookouts to spot the icebergs. So there's your answer, the lookouts, okay? And it's one word. So here, if I go back, I can say it was the sole responsibility of the lookout. And in this case, they'll probably take the singular, but if you want to double check and make sure, you could put in the S. But here, lookout or lookouts both make sense. So singular, plural are both okay in this case. Be very careful with singular and plurals. Okay, the chief reason the iceberg wasn't detected was the something of the sea at that night. So hopefully you don't have to go back to the passage for this one, because if you remember from your reading, you should be able to answer that very easily. Very good, Utsav in JS7. Yeah, calmness. Yeah, the sea was calm. There were no waves crashing up against the iceberg, so it was difficult to see. Now keep reading, so don't just jump to the blank. Make sure that when you're doing these paragraph completion questions, you're actually reading each line, okay? Don't jump through these lines. Because of this, there were no waves crashing against the iceberg, making it difficult to spot. So this sentence actually makes me feel confident that calmness is a good answer there. The captain swerved, but the iceberg scraped the side of the ship, ripping the something of the ship. Now, if you have some good English vocabulary, you can answer this without reading the passage. And Utsav, your answer is correct, but careful, don't capitalize it, okay? Don't use a big letter. So either answer all big letters, so answer all like this, okay? All capitals, or just keep it all small, okay? Hull, all right? The hull of the ship. The hull is the belly, it's the stomach of the ship. Okay, it's the autocorrect on your phone, got it. All right. So the hull of the ship. The hull is the belly of the boat. Okay, don't write belly. Hull is the more correct term. So hull is the right way to go there. Okay, so let's keep going. Things should have been fine, nevertheless, but the watertight compartments were poorly designed, and once the water was in a few compartments, it was able to something into all of the others. And here again, if you have some good English vocabulary, even basic English vocabulary, you should be able to answer this with a simple word. Not seep, not slipping, but spill is the most accurate answer. It was able to spill into the other compartments, okay? So lookouts, spill, calmness, and we're on to 10 to 13. Again, if you're not sure about the answers for that paragraph completion question, they're easy to skim read for as long as you can identify the paraphrasing. All right, let's have a look at the last three. Write your answers in boxes 10 to 13 on your sheet. Now, we should very quickly realize that this information is coming from one part of the text. Where are these four questions coming from? What part of the passage are these last four questions coming from? JS7 says the last. Yeah, you mean the last paragraph, I believe. Yeah, it's coming from the last paragraph. Absolutely. Again, IELTS does generally follow with the structure of the passage, especially for passage 1, because passage 1 should be the easiest passage. So here, if we're having difficulty, we can easily go back and look for it just to double check our answers. Now, pay attention here. There's a little bit of a change. It's no more than 2 words from the passage for each answer. For fill in the blanks, make sure that the word fits correctly in the context. Also, make sure that your word form is correct. Okay, so pay attention to those details. All right, to avoid a Titanic-like disaster in the future, something formed the International Ice Patrol. Anybody know who formed it? I can't remember. The maritime authorities? Let's have a look. You have enough time. Girls and guys, if you're good at reading, if you've trained yourself and you're effective, you should have enough time. So, after the disaster of the Titanic, maritime authorities realized that a system needed to be put into place to monitor icebergs. So, yeah, maritime authorities, good. And if I don't know the spelling, I can check it there, and now it will be correct. So, maritime authorities. and it's 2 words. You need both words to get it correct. Okay, if you just put maritime or if you just put authorities, it will be wrong. The IIP's goal is to track the relevant data and something of the icebergs. I bet I can guess that one without even looking at the passage. Yeah, movement of icebergs, the location. Now again, if I want to be sure, I can go back real quick. And I can see here their purpose was to track all of the relevant meteorological and oceanographic to chart the movement of all major icebergs. Okay, yeah, so movement is what they're giving us for the answer. Okay, and movement of icebergs. All right, the Canadian Space Agency bounces something off the water to measure iceberg movement. Anybody know what that is? It was kind of an interesting one, so I remembered that. I don't have to look back for that one. That's right, JS7, microwaves, just like in your microwave oven. Yeah, microwaves, okay? They bounce those microwaves off, exactly the same kind of microwaves that you have in your oven to warm up your lunch or your pizza. They do that, except they're not warming up pizza. They're checking out those icebergs and seeing what's happening with them, where they are. Okay, last question. This data renders large-scale maritime disasters something. And again, this one you can probably answer without going back to the passage. Anybody? Location would not be right in this case. So if you're not sure, then it's not from happening, not futile. Those don't work. There's a much more simple word. Okay, if you girls and guys are having trouble, then let's just look back. Oop, jumped a little bit too far there. Okay, here we go. So, I remember it's at the very end, so it's easy for me to look if I'm not sure. Maritime vessels have access to this information in real time, which allows them to know exactly where any local icebergs are, meaning that a repeat of the Titanic disaster is virtually impossible. Okay, so that's what I want to put for that answer. All right. So again, if you're not sure, don't guess. If you have time, do go back and check. Virtually impossible. Okay, don't say impossible because they're in academic thought, there's pretty much nothing is impossible. So you do need both words, virtually impossible. So it's almost impossible. All right, so that is this first reading passage in your test book 1, test 1 from our products. And those are some strategies on how to solve those questions. If you go into our course, there will be detailed examples and explanations for question strategies for all 11 types of questions that you can see in the reading. And Lytton, writing virtually impossible, all in capital letters is great. Just make sure you don't make any spelling mistakes. All right, so that's it for today's reading class for live streaming. Again, do not forget to visit us on our websites for lots more information, practice, and help there, and all of our videos are up there as well. Does anybody have any questions about this? Does anybody have any questions about the reading section? Tomorrow we're going to do a little bit of writing, Mahdi. I'm thinking maybe a task 1 and a task 2. I'll see how much time I have. Yes, Utsav, you can always make a suggestion. Absolutely, feel free. It's a democracy. JS7, you're saying they're too easy to answer. These ones are fairly easy because it is reading passage 1. So remember, reading passage 1 should be the easiest. Then passage 2 will get more difficult. Passage 3 will get even more difficult. So you should be able to do a pretty good job on passage 1 if you have the right skills to get a band 7. Shita, tomorrow's class will be at 4:30 Central European Budapest time. That's my time. Today I had to be a little bit earlier because I have an appointment later in the day. The title of the passage, Laka, is it was there. I guess maybe you joined the class a little bit late. Okay, Felix, I just answered that question, so hopefully you caught that. Again, 4:30 p.m. Central European time tomorrow. That's 16:30. Yes, Vikram, I will do my best to cover both task 1 and task 2 for everyone tomorrow. Okay. Thanks, Adil, for that laugh. I practice. I don't know if I'm the greatest teacher ever, but I definitely enjoy teaching, so I think that's a part of it. All right, girls and guys, thank you so much for watching, for participating, and hopefully you will remember to practice these skills at home. Remember, practice makes perfect. You do have beautiful brains. You all have the ability to learn not just 2, but even 3, 4 languages in a lifetime at a very, very high level. So keep up the good study. Keep developing your neurons, and I'm sure that you will reach the scores that you want, and you will achieve your dreams of going to the university that you want to go to, going to the country that you want to go to, getting the dream job, and building a beautiful family and having a great life. I'm sure you'll get there. Just keep at it, okay? Keep positive. Don't let anybody else tell you otherwise. You're all amazing people. Bye for now. I'll see you in tomorrow's class. Have a great evening, a great night, or good dreams if it's late where you're at.